Vicky Blake, director of the UCU University and College Union. Thanks for accepting the interview. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So let's start with the Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan's situation. He has been held in isolation in prison for 22 years now, since 1999. He has been denied visit from his family and lawyers. There are now concerns about Öcalan's health and whereabouts as well. Can you comment on this treatment? Very short, very briefly.
Is disgraceful. I would have concerns about someone being held in isolation for 22 hours, 22 days, so 22 years. I cannot imagine the impact it's having on him mentally and physically. And it is just utterly inhumane. There's no excuse for it. There is no justification for doing this to anyone at all.
Why do you think Turkish state is keeping Mr. Abdullah Öcalan under isolation? Do you think keeping Öcalan under isolation is also isolating Kurdish people as well?
Yes, I think you're exactly right there. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Isolation is the opposite of people being together and realizing that they're strong when they're together. And I think the move to isolate people, and it's very extreme for Ocalan, and he must be very strong, I think, to still be carrying on through this ordeal. But the idea behind it must be to try to break him, to try to break people who support him, to try to break people who look up to him, because we have power when we come together, when we realize that, when we act collectively, when we organize together. So any attempt to undermine the movement, to undermine him, to undermine the Kurdish people in their struggle is reflected in that isolation.
But dear Vicky, also isolation is against the human rights and international conventions as well. It's against the um, law as well, international law too. So where does the Turkish power come from to still keep Mr. Abdullah Öcalan under isolation?
It's absolutely unjustifiable. There's no justification for it whatsoever. And I think that some of this power comes from the lack of international outcry. We need to see governments across the world calling out this disgraceful abuse of human rights. And that's why the union that I'm president of, the University and College Union in the UK, that is why we have joined. It's a trade union campaign, Freedom for Ocalan campaign. That's why we have joined, because we believe that pressure needs to be put on our own government in the UK to speak up on human rights violations in Turkey against Ocalan, but also against others. And we have also been doing work with our sister union in Turkey around. There have been attacks on academic freedom, marginalization of academics and students who speak out. So I think the answer to your question is that their power comes from so many people feeling that they can't make a difference. And we need to realize that we can, and that we all have the capacity to influence other people, especially when we come together. So for me, that is why it's so important that my union and other unions here in the UK have joined together to support this campaign.
The European Committee on Torture has criticized the treatment of Abdullah Öcalan by the Turkish authorities. Do you think that there is a willingness and ability in Europe and in the United Kingdom to intervene with the Turkish government to address the treatment of Öcalan? Very short, very briefly.
I think we need to do more to make sure there is that will, in short. I think that it is too easy for governments to look to one side, to not really deal with it. And there can be no excuse for it. And yeah, so I believe that there is a will that can be tapped into among ordinary people if they know and understand what is going on. So part of the battle is to make sure that people do know and understand what exactly is going on and how wrong it is. And then we will be able to create more of this pressure. And that's why, again, going back to the trade union movement, it's why it's so important that we have a voice. We represent nearly 7 million people in the UK. We need to educate our own members of trade unions and our communities to build that pressure.
Lastly, do you see parallels in the cases of Abdullah Öcalan and Nelson Mandela, and are there lessons to be learned from campaign against apartheid and for the release of Nelson Mandela? Can you suggest any such lessons about this?
I was very young when Nelson Mandela was in prison, but I do remember it being in the news, and I remember people talking about it, and I remember my mum refusing to buy South African produce because of the apartheid regime that was in place at the time. I think we need to give really careful consideration to how we do put the pressure on, and we need to be talking to our colleagues and comrades in Turkey and outside of Turkey about how we put this pressure on. But I absolutely, of course, I see parallels between the two situations, because being imprisoned in isolation and contravention of human rights is what's happening, and it is what happened to Nelson Mandela. It is really outrageous. Like, I actually don't have the words to convey properly how awful this is. The English language is not helping me to express how I feel about it, because to be in isolation for your views, to be targeted in that way, to be held apart from who you love, to be held apart from the people that you care about, to be imprisoned in this way is emblematic, I think, of the struggle for the Kurdish people to have recognition. And I think it is designed to further marginalize people, to try to make people give up hope. And we have to do everything we can to counteract that. And because I'm in an education union, perhaps it's obvious that I would say this, but education has to be a key way that we get people to understand what's happening. I think lots of people from the UK will go on holiday, for example, in Turkey, and have no idea. And I'd be very careful about saying to people, oh, you shouldn't go, because I would want people to be able to have an understanding of where it is that they're going. And I think maybe we need to challenge it from that angle. I'd be really interested in talking more about it, because I don't think I have all the answers myself, but I think we need to open up spaces with activists internationally to talk about how are we going to put the spotlight on this situation, and how are we going to shame the Turkish government into doing what they should have. Well, they should never have imprisoned him, but they should have so long ago released him. We need a proper return to talks. We need peace talks, functional peace talks. And I don't think that can happen while Ocalan is imprisoned. It just, the two things don't work together. So I don't know what more to say other than that we have to get more people aware of the reality of what is going on under this regime. And my union, I think members were shocked when they saw the university protests being clamped down on, for example. And that was one way in which the news cut through, because people could relate to their experiences of working in a university. We have just in the UK had a strike in 58 universities. None of us were at risk of being put in prison over that strike. Although here, we also have just seen the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill. There's legislation that is coming through here in the UK that actually jeopardizes our right to protest as well. And we have to build the links in understanding what's happening in our situation and relate that to what is happening in Turkey. And what we have the power to do is to come together to oppose that in both instances, and in all other human rights violations across the world. And just one more thing I want to say really about this is it's very easy to lose hope. It's very easy with so many terrible things happening to lose hope in what we can achieve together. But from what I understand of Ocalan, from the writings that he has continued to make, from the way that he has continued to struggle, even in extremely poor health, is that we always need to have hope that we can build. And I believe he has hope in humanity and in people's ability to come together to get his release and to have recognition for Kurdish people. So we should not give up hope in what we can do in our situation outside. We're not in prison. You know, we should be able to build our movement to create more hope.
Dear Vicky Blake, Director of the UCU University and College Union, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.